The Smashing Pumpkins frontman and leader Billy Corgan has feuded with many bands and artists over the years, and today we're going to take a look at some of his more notable feuds that don't involve his ex-bandmates. If I've missed any feuds, put them down in the comment section below. Collective Soul ascended to prominence in the mid-90s with their 1994 hit single Shine from their debut album. The song was a huge hit topping the US mainstream rock charts, and it was also a crossover hit peaking at number 11 on the US Billboard Hot 100 charts. It was during the time that Shine took off that the Smashing Pumpkins frontman Billy Corgan slammed Collective Soul in the press, referring to frontman Ed Roland as, and I quote, a shameless ripoff artist. According to Cleveland.com, Corgan was upset with how similar the song sounded to the Smashing Pumpkins track Drown, and Corgan was so upset that he sued Collective Soul in the mid-90s, but Roland was able to produce a demo of the song that dated back to 1989, which predated the formation of the Smashing Pumpkins. It was rumored that Collective Soul, for their second album, which was self-titled and came out the following year, wrote a diss track about Corgan called Smashing Young Man. While Corgan isn't named in the track, there are lyrics like synthetic-like and saying he lives, and I quote, in a self-lit spotlight. As recently as 2020, Ed Roland gave an interview to Cleveland.com where he clarified what the song was about, saying, "Everyone thought that because he was busy smack-talking about us all the time, which didn't bother me at all. It's just a fun song, and the next thing you know, Billy starts coming at me again, and I'm like, dude, no. And finally, there was one point where I just said, yeah, it was written about him, sure. Whatever he wants to think, I don't care. But I love Smashing Pumpkins. If I ever met Billy, I'd tell him what a great musician, great songwriter he is. I've got nothing negative to say. I've got other things to do in my life than about people." The Smashing Pumpkins would briefly cover the song Shine at a show in 2010, and here's what happened next.
I hate that song.
Fast forward to 2019 and Billy Corgan was answering fan questions on Instagram when one person asked the frontman if he ever made peace with Collective Soul, to which he responded, F Collective Soul, now and always. Billy Corgan would give an interview to Philstar in 2012 just before playing a show in the Philippines, where he singled out the band Soundgarden, who he labeled as a nostalgia act for making money off playing their old tunes. Soundgarden would break up in 1997 and reform almost a decade later. Corgan would state, "There are bands that are essentially coming back to only make money playing their old albums, and maybe somewhere in the back of their minds they are thinking that there might be a future. I'm not in that business, obviously. I condemn anybody who's in that business but doesn't admit he's in that business. When Soundgarden came back and they just played their old songs, great. I was a fan of Soundgarden, but call it for what it is." The same month, Corgan appeared on a radio station and seemed to indicate that it was Soundgarden frontman Chris Cornell who started the feud, with Corgan claiming that in 2007, Cornell claimed he didn't think that the Smashing Pumpkins reunion at the time was a real reunion. In 2007, Corgan had reunited with original drummer Jimmy Chamberlin, but not the rest of the original band, leading many in the press and their fan base to criticize Corgan. Cornell would shoot back in the press in 2012, telling ABC Radio, "When Billy Corgan was completely broke, I got him a movie deal with director Cameron Crowe where he made $40,000. He was very happy about that, and he was specifically happy about the $40,000. So next time you see him, tell him he owes me my $40,000 back." While Cornell wouldn't state which Cameron Crowe film he was referring to, it's probably safe to assume he was talking about the 1992 film Singles, which included the Smashing Pumpkins tune Drown. It was following Chris Cornell's death in 2017 that Corgan seemed to express some regret over the pair's falling out, telling an interviewer from the San Francisco Weekly, "I wish I had more answers and I'd done more. I knew Chris and we had a bit of a falling out and we were never able to patch that up. I wish I hadn't contributed in even the most minuscule way to his unhappiness." The DreamWorks movie Shrek was one of the most successful franchises of the last 2 decades. California band Smash Mouth would forever be linked to the movie franchise, as their song All Star is prominently featured in the opening sequence of the first film, but they would also do a cover of the Monkees song I'm a Believer at the end of the first movie as well. In a surprising twist, Billy Corgan came out a few years ago and claimed that it was the Smashing Pumpkins who were first asked to provide music to the closing scene of the first film with their song Untitled. Smash Mouth, however, would tell a different version of events, responding to Corgan's claims on social media, writing, "Actually, we said no and Michael Austin from DreamWorks kept calling. That went on for over a month. We assume multiple bands were asked. If it feeds Billy's ego to think they were first, then let them think that." The indie rock band Pavement never anticipated the reaction they'd get from Corgan when frontman Stephen Malkmus wrote the lyrics to the song Range Life, where he'd mentioned the Smashing Pumpkins. The song was found on the group's 1994 album Crooked Rain, and the lyrics go as follows. Out on tour with the Smashing Pumpkins, Nature Kids, they don't have no function, adding, I don't understand what they mean and I could really give it F. It probably didn't help that Range Life became one of Pavement's best known songs, and the criticisms seemed to come out of nowhere since Pavement never toured with the Smashing Pumpkins up until this point. In an interview, Corgan said the lyrics to Range Life were, and I quote, rooted in jealousy, going on to say, there's always been flack we've gotten from certain bands that somehow we cheated our way to the top. People don't fall in love to Pavement, they put on Smashing Pumpkins or Hole or Nirvana because these bands actually mean something to them. The feud would range on for more than 2 decades, and in a 1999 interview with the New York Rock magazine, Malcolmus would state, we never dissed them, I only laughed about the band name because it does sound kinda silly. I like their songs, well most of their songs anyways, I just dissed their status. I never really cared for the rock and roll lifestyle or being indie. Corgan would keep the feud going for years after the original incident, as in 2010, upon learning that Pavement would be sharing the same festival bill as the Smashing Pumpkins, he took to Twitter to say the following, just found out that Smashing Pumpkins is playing with Pavement in Brazil, it's going to be one of those New Orleans type funerals. I say that because they represent the death of the alternative dream and we follow the affirmation of life part. Fast forward 8 years later and Smashing Pumpkins announced a reunion tour with their classic lineup. The only problem, Corgan was involved in a nasty feud with bassist Darcy Retzky at the time, so she wouldn't be involved. It was around the time of the reunion being announced that Malcolmus would talk to Spin Magazine and diss Corgan's reunion, stating, the numbers will be out there. As soon as there's a hint that Fleetwood Mac's not selling well, you'll hear about it. The members of Smashing Pumpkins, Lindsey Buckingham is not in the Smashing Pumpkins, but there's a female bass player named Darcy, and she's not going to be on this tour. And people are doing a similar complaint because the band has already done like 3 fake reunions, almost reunions, and this is supposed to be, I think they're just playing their old hits, they're not going to bore us with a new album or whatever. In 1998, the Smashing Pumpkins returned with the electronically influenced album Adore, which sold far less than its predecessors. The following year, in October of 1999, it was revealed that Billy Corgan and company would leave longtime managers Q Prime after having issues with how their management handled the group's last album. The band would spend nearly a year searching for a new manager before landing on Sharon Osbourne. Several months after announcing Sharon Osbourne as their new manager, she would suddenly quit. In a statement posted on January 12, 2000 that read, it is with great pride and enthusiasm that I took on management of the Pumpkins back in October. I must resign today due to medical reasons. Billy Corgan was making me sick. A spokesman for the band wouldn't elaborate on what happened behind the scenes when the statement went out at the time. About a week after the announcement came out, Sharon spoke to MTV, where she put the blame on Billy Corgan's behavior, including his, and I quote, schoolboy intimidation tactics, which included the silent treatment and nasty stares. In addition to feuding with Corgan over his clothing choices, she revealed the trip to Scandinavia contributed to her decision to leave, telling Q Magazine that Corgan wanted the press to sign a Guns N' Roses style contract, giving him complete control and copyright over their works. Sharon would tell Q, the journalists were unionized, it was illegal for them to agree to a deal like that. Billy's reaction was, F them, the unions mean nothing to me. The band would end up suing Osbourne and she would countersue. By 2014, both Corgan and Osbourne were booked as guests on Howard Stern's radio show, and it appeared by that point in time, they were once again friendly and the feud was water under the bridge. Corgan's relationship with Hole frontwoman Courtney Love goes back decades. In the early 90s, the pair were romantically involved, and in 1991, the Smashing Pumpkins were playing some dates alongside Nirvana in Europe. Soon after, Corgan and Love broke up, and Cobain and Love became an item. In 1998, Hole would release their 3rd album, Celebrity Skin, and it was the same year that Corgan told several publications that the new Hole record wouldn't have happened without his contributions and guidance. Courtney Love, however, would shoot back against those claims. Corgan, for his part, is credited as co-writing 5 of the tracks on the album. The pair attempted to collaborate on Hole's 2010 album Nobody's Daughter, but soon afterwards Corgan and Love were taking shots at each other on Twitter, with Corgan telling Love to, and I quote, go somewhere nice and live off Kurt Cobain's money. He would clarify the animosity between him and Love, telling Rolling Stone that he hadn't given his permission for Love to use some of his songs on her new album at the time. Then in 2011, during a concert in Brazil, Love told the crowd she was the inspiration behind the Smashing Pumpkins' 1993 album Siamese Dream and 1995's Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. By 2014, though, it seemed like it was all water under the bridge, with Love posting a photo of the pair with the caption, see all the hatchets buried and true love never dies in the heart. The post has since been deleted, so who knows whether we'll see another feud crop up. One of CNN's highest rated shows is Anderson Cooper 360. I haven't seen the show in years, but I remember he used to have a lighter news segment on his program called The Ridiculous, which calls out ridiculous news items. On his program one night in October of 2014, he would take a swing at the Smashing Pumpkins frontman Billy Corgan for appearing on the front cover of a hometown cat magazine called Pause Chicago for their summer issue. Not only that, but his Twitter page teased that night's episode with the tweet that read, "Where are they now? From 6 million albums to posing with cats." On top of that, Cooper also criticized Corgan for appearing in a local furniture ad in his hometown as well. Here's the clip of Anderson Cooper goofing on the Smashing Pumpkins frontman.
Time now for The Ridiculous, and tonight I'd like to invite you to come with me on a musical trip down memory lane. Not too far back, just about 20 years, to when the shirts were flannel, the rock was alternative, and Smashing Pumpkins burst into the mainstream with their album Siamese Dream. So maybe the guitar sound is a bit derivative of My Bloody Valentine, but that's besides the point. Siamese Dream came out in 1993 and sold 6 million copies worldwide and is listed on Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums of all time. Smashing Pumpkins made more records, but you really don't hear much about them much these days, until that is now. Because tonight I'm happy to report that frontman Billy Corgan is back and edgier than ever on the cover of Pause Chicago magazine. Now, I don't know if you can read the sub-headline there. It says, Billy Corgan's Siamese Dream. Well played, Pause Chicago, well played. Now, this is a kind of jarring event for a couple reasons. One being that it made us Google what else Billy Corgan has been up to, and apparently just last year, he was in a commercial for a Chicago furniture store.
Wait, that's a Walter E. Smith chair. Walter E. Smith.
So perhaps Billy Corgan is, I don't know, offers alternative rocker, but I think maybe there's more to this. Maybe he's being ironic, or maybe when the cool rock stars start doing less rock starry things, it kind of makes us face our own mortality. See, I want REM to stay just the way I know and love them. I don't want Everybody Hurts to suddenly be used in an Excedrin commercial. I don't ever want to see a product called Eddie Vedder's Prune Jam. Maybe the internet is the real problem here. There was a time that nobody outside of Chicago would have ever seen the cover of Pause Chicago magazine. To the pinnacles of cool from days gone by, do what you gotta do. You'll always have a rock and roll in our hearts and on The Ridiculous.
Strangely enough, Billy Corgan wasn't the first person to respond to Cooper's segment. Pause Chicago first responded by photoshopping Anderson Cooper's head onto a magazine about dogs, and Corgan would have his say on Twitter shortly afterwards, stating, "Sorry to disappoint, but when I'm not raising Cain for a great organization like Pause Chicago, I'm still making real music. I realize you're too busy being a globalist shill to know the difference." Corgan wasn't done just yet, though. By the end of the month, he started selling FU Anderson Cooper shirts in his hometown of Chicago during a concert, with proceeds from the shirts going to a local charity. 3 years later, in 2017, Corgan appeared with the newly reunited Smashing Pumpkins, minus bassist Darcy Retzky, on Howard Stern's radio show on Sirius XM, and the shock jock brought up his feud with Anderson Cooper. Stern would ask Corgan whether he wanted an apology from the news broadcaster, to which Corgan replied, "I wouldn't want one. It wouldn't mean anything to me. I've seen enough of his ilk. He's playing for a team that doesn't have my best interest at heart. I would argue America's best interest at heart." It would be ironic that years later a leaked tape of Howard Stern would surface from 2013 in which he claimed he helped revive Billy Corgan's career in 2012 during an internal team meeting. A fan would reach out to Corgan on Instagram, and the exchange went as follows. "Howard Stern takes credit for your high charting in a newly leaked video. Thoughts? Annoyed me." To which Corgan responded, "I love Howard and appreciate him more than words can convey. I was in no way offended by what he said. He has been incredibly supportive of my work as an artist. There was no better interviewer in the world." In January of 2017, Corgan would appear on Mancow's radio show, and Corgan would take glee over a recent interview that Cooper conducted with President Donald Trump's counselor Kellyanne Conway, revealing, "I once had a feud with Anderson Cooper, who ran fake news about me a few years back. I would recommend anyone to watch the clip from last night of Anderson Cooper talking to Kellyanne Conway. He spent 7 minutes melting down. It's one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen from a journalist, especially someone at his level who understands the game. It's something I thought I'd never see," he would say. CNN would end up running a documentary about the decade the 90s and barely gave a mention to the Smashing Pumpkins. A fan would reach out to Corgan on Instagram saying, "Just watched CNN the 90s and I was very upset that they only had a soundbite of you." Corgan would respond saying, "It does not surprise me when certain media try to write us out of history or diminish our place in music. If you haven't noticed, it's what they do with routine precision to others. If you were not in their snow globe world," he'd say. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. We'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories.